What's up, guys? We're back with another Dragon Ball Z SH Figuarts review, taking a look at one of my most anticipated Figuarts releases for the year for sure. We've had a couple versions of this guy over the years, but they've all been kind of similar, and we all know that Frieza has a handful of other very different forms, and we're finally getting one of them. So we've had Final Form and Gold Frieza for a while, but now it's time to go backwards, and we're finally getting our first form Frieza with the Frieza pod. So I'm really excited to take a look at this guy. I mean, Frieza is, he's the big bad over everything. When it's all said and done, he is the big bad for Dragon Ball Z. And this is one that I've just really wanted to get my hands on. So we've got him here in the standard style packaging for the line. It's a little bit of a different shape than usual because of the pod, but it's still that same Dragon Ball feel. So figured there in the window, you've got the product shot that runs down the side and then wraps around the side panel as well. And then the back of the box, as usual, has a bunch of product shots showcasing Frieza, some of his accessories, and then of course a few shots of that pod. So let's do it. Let's pull him out and take a look. And here we go out of the package. Finally, our Figuarts first form Frieza. And this is definitely, again, one of the most anticipated releases in a while. It's a big figure, it's a big character. Well, not literally big, but you get my meaning here. It's a big one. This is a pivotal release. It's a big one to finally get something that's not Golden Frieza, Final Form Frieza, whatever. It's nice to be able to go back and get some of these older forms. I hope this means we're going to get Form 2 and even 3 at some point, because I really do like those forms as well. But this is the one to get. If we were only ever going to get one extra form, it always had to be First Form Frieza, and this very much feels like kind of a deluxe release because it's also got the pod. So let's get started, see what he can do, see how he moves around. This is still a very familiar type of figure. He is, of course, unique in a few ways, but he is very familiar in terms of armored characters as of late because, we've been getting so many of them lately. So we've got a head that can look really far up. He can look really far down, too. The neck, of course, I probably don't need to say it, but it's independently articulated, so it moves with the head. We've got some crazy, crazy tilt there. And then you've got full rotation. Shoulder pads will go up. Arms will swivel at the shoulder. There is a small but useful butterfly there, and then the arms go out. We've got bicep swivel. Elbows go about there. You do have forearm swivel as well because of the gauntlets. And then we've got, surprisingly, a really good hinge at the wrist. I was worried that because the hands look like they're so close to those gauntlets that they weren't actually gonna hinge, but they do move quite well. And then we've got, of course, rotation. It's our normal ball hinge. He is kind of limited at the torso, so he's got really good crunch forward. You get some gapping on the back, but not too much. But there's not really much in the way of tilt here. He can't really do a whole lot. He just sort of bobbles around. And there's no rotation at the torso either, at the diaphragm. He does, however, have it at the waist. And he can move slightly forward and backward there, but not too much. So he's not as articulated at the torso as I thought he would be. The legs go out only about this far. They kick forward all the way. They kick backwards, likely more than you're ever going to need. You do have a thigh cut there. We've got knees that go backwards about that far. And then we've got rotation at the ankle. And then you've also got hinge, which they go backwards way, way far. And they go forwards a good bit as well. Somehow they manage to get some articulation in terms of pointing that upwards just a little bit. And then you do also have a little bit of rocker there. He does have weird feet, obviously, so that does play a factor in moving him around. But they work well enough here. He of course has the tail, and it's like a two-part system. So you've got a ball hinge that connects the part that's going to his butt, and then the part that's going away from him. So the tail proper, I guess. So it can hinge up and down, and then you can rotate it side to side there as well. So you can swivel it at the top if you wanted to, but you can also swivel it at the bottom of that ball, and then it hinges up and down. So it can go around and wrap around the front of him. And it does help in kind of balancing him, because I do find that he's a little back heavy because of that tail. But otherwise, I think he is pretty solid. He moves in many ways very similarly to a lot of the other recent armored characters. The one big difference, I think, is that he's not as mobile around the chest region. Now, as far as aesthetics go, I'm quite happy with this figure. He's small. but he is impactful, if that makes any sense. So he's not the biggest figure, and nor should he be, and that's quite obvious, and we'll see that later on. But he makes a nice shelf presence. His colors, in particular, are very different. There's nothing else like this really outside of, Boo, and they maybe aren't going to go on the same spot on your shelf. So you've got this small, horned, pink and purple alien that's going to stand out amongst all of the other armored characters that we've been getting lately. And just like all of the other characters that we've gotten as of late, I've been saying this quite a bit, they've pretty well nailed this one. I think he looks great. I think he's sized pretty well. He's not too big. I don't think he's too small by any means. And the colors on him, I mean, they just pop. He could probably use a little bit of, I don't want to say shading for the sake of just having like shadow all over his skin tones, but like maybe a little hint of a slightly darker pink wash to bring out that line work, just to accentuate it a little bit. I feel like that might have helped to sell the figure a little bit more. But otherwise, I mean, the sculpt is fantastic. The paintwork, where it is applied, is really clean. It is kind of minimal on paint, as we expect to see, which usually is not a big deal, and it's not really a big deal here either. But you do have like some muted purpley tones for the hands and for the feet. They aren't white, but they do have a hint of something in them. The same goes for kind of the clavicle, throat region there, and just that deep purple on his armor and the tail looks fantastic. I think the sculpt work for those lines really pop, and they just add a little bit more depth and dimension to the figure, because otherwise he'd kind of look like he had some hot dogs for arms and legs. And I think it helps just to make him pop a little bit more, because he's not overly muscular compared to a lot of other figures in this line. So I think it's nice just to see that change. And then of course we've got this head sculpt, which, I mean, I think they nailed it. They really killed this one. It's fantastic. There is kind of a slight muted smokiness to the white, so it's not super bright white, but it's not dark either. It's kind of an in-between. It's very, I guess muted is the right word to say there, but it's of course contrasted to the black spikes, the horns, and then of course the big purple orb that sits in his head. And I think it looks fantastic. Again, it's a nice eye catcher. It is a very nice shelf presence-y kind of piece. And then the paintwork on the face is really well done. The eyes, really clean and crisp. Everything is straightforward. The expression, at least this default one right out of the box, is a very stoic yet very devious and quite evil looking, very Frieza-esque look. So I think they really killed it here. There really aren't anything straight out of the box that I would say, yes, has to be fixed. Maybe a few little things that specifically the shading on the arms and legs might have been a help, but otherwise I think he does look fantastic regardless. Now, as far as accessories goes, not counting the pod, which we will get to here in just a second, I do think that Frieza is pretty well stacked here. He has a lot of stuff. It's maybe not everything, but at the same time, I don't really think I'm specifically missing anything. He does have a handful of heads and faces to talk about. So despite the fact that this head may look exactly like the one that was just on screen with a new face, it's not. So he has 2 heads and 5 faces. 3 faces for one, 2 faces for this one. And everything's just a little bit more accentuated with this one. Like the sides of the head are kind of flared out a little bit more, and then he's just a little bit angrier. So his brow is a little bit more furrowed, and the faces are sculpted in such a way that they won't work on that other head sculpt. So you've got this one here which has him screaming, and then you've got this one here which has him kind of maniacally laughing as well. And these 2 faces work on this particular head. I should also mention that all of the heads, or all the faces, have the ports on the side for a scouter. So you get 1 scouter for Frieza here, and he's got, that going on. So you've either got the port that's kind of capped him off, where I guess it's his ear. I don't know what it's supposed to be. I assume it's his ear. You take the ear off, and then you pop the scouter on. Otherwise, you'll have a gaping hole on the side, and you don't want that. And then we've also got the first head sculpt, this one here, which when you get them right next to each other, it's kind of obvious how different they are, but at the same time, it's pretty minimal. It's just enough that the faces don't work. So you've got a angry one here, so he's gritting his teeth, he's super mad. And then we've got this one here where he's just got kind of like pursed lips, and he's smiling, about to laugh almost. So it's very similar to the first head sculpt or first face that I talked about, but it is different enough as well. We've also got some extra hands, so he comes with fists in the box. You get a set of these, which are just sort of like, open palm style pose, gripping style hands. You get a singular right hand pointing finger, and then you get a crooked finger, like a come hither kind of finger, or one where he's pointing at someone because we know what he does when it comes to his left hand. So you've got those there. He does come with a Namekian Dragon Ball, so he gets the 5-star ball. So he gets that big boy. And then we get like his Supernova Death Ball effect. And this has got to be like the smallest effect that we've gotten in Dragon Ball Figuarts, right? So it goes on the pointing finger, and you've got this here. So it's very minimal, and you know, it's just a little ball, but it's very to the point. Like, you know what this is when you see it. You know what the scene is. You know what he's going to do. He's about to annihilate a planet. So it's small, but I think the point is nicely made with this. So I do like it, and I plan to use that when I display the figure. Now, he does, of course, have the pod. So let's move him aside for just a second, and let's talk about this guy here. So this is our Frieza pod. And I think it looks fantastic. Colors are really well done. So you've got this nice metallic gold all over it for like the vents. Nice matte finish for the black. And then it does have a little stand to put it on as well. It does have a port for a Tamashii base right there. It doesn't come with a stand, but you can peg a stand into it if you want it to be, you know, higher up off your display. So I do think that looks nice. It's sized really well. And overall, I think it just, you know, is a nice presentation piece. It is really interesting, though, in how they implemented it, though, because there's half of Frieza inside. So you've got all the controls here, and then you have Frieza's legs and part of his tail there with kind of the armrest in the back and the interior part of the chair. So it's just kind of an odd setup, but it works really well so that you still have the full idea of what's going on inside this pod without having to cram a figure in there. So from like a quality of life, ease of use perspective, I think it works really well. So what you do here is you actually just take old Freezy Pop apart. So you pop him apart at the waist, and then you'll actually use part of the tail as well. So pop the tail off, the back there, and then you can peg that tail on right there and have it kind of hanging out. And then we'll get this madman in there. There you go. And I mean, he's super angry right now, but he is in his pod, and it doesn't really take much effort. It's just pop him apart and put him in there, and he's good to go. And I do really like the imagery of the tail hanging out the side because, I mean, that's what it does, really. So I think it works nicely. And this is definitely a cool display piece. This instance in particular makes me want two of them, one to have in and one to have out, because now that I see this in person and I've got it out and I've messed around with it, it's hard to not want him in this thing at all times. It's a very iconic piece for Frieza as a character throughout most of the Namek saga, and I really think they did a good job with it. It's sized really well. The paint, the colors on it, the interior design aspect of it, and how they managed to get the figure in it without having to, again, cram him in there is just a really nice touch. I think they did a fantastic job on the pod and his accessories in general, really. So yeah, this is a really solid figure. I don't think I have a single gripe with this thing outside of the fact that I think I could have used a little bit of shading of some kind on the skin tones. And that's not really even a gripe. It's just more of I think it would have been a little bit better. I don't think it's a bad thing that it doesn't have it. There's always room for improvement. Otherwise, I think the sculpt is fantastic. All the paintwork on this figure, where it is applied, is really clean and crisp. I have no issues with mine. And I think the accessory set is really well done. The figure itself, on his own, not counting the pod, is pretty robust. I mean, he has 5 faces. He's got 2 different head sculpts. He's got the scouter, hands. You've got an effect part, however small. And of course, we have a Namekian Dragon Ball. And then you throw the pod in the mix, and I think they did a really good job. The only negative there is that you can't have both setups without cannibalizing your figure. So I'm in a situation where I want both of these on my shelf. I want an in of the pod and I want an out of the pod kind of setup going. That's my own personal thing. I think they did a great job, and frankly, the fact that I want another one really tells you exactly how good I think this is, because it warrants 2 display options on the shelf for sure. So that's going to do it for this look at the SH Figuarts Dragon Ball Z First Form Frieza and Frieza Pod. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.